Recently, I had the chance to sit down with some of my friends and hear how Jesus changed their lives. I always love hearing someone's testimony, and I thought you might also. The friends I've interviewed are all Jewish people whose lives were radically changed by Jesus. My husband thinks we should call this series Linked to Messiah. Today, you're going to meet my friend Karol. Karol has a huge heart for Jesus and sharing his love with our Jewish friends. When Karol was in her PhD program, God planted a seed in her heart from her economics tutor. She shares how a compulsive eating disorder and a 12-step program brought her to know Jesus as her personal Messiah. Wait till you hear why she was afraid to tell her Jewish family about her conversion to Jesus. Buckle up, my friends. This is an amazing testimony. Hey there, my friends. Welcome to the Links to Messiah podcast, where we are passionate about teaching our children all about the connections between the Old and New Testament. I'm your host, Rachel Links Kushner, also known as the Chief Enthusiasm Officer of Links to Messiah. And I am so thrilled to have you join us today. Come along and discover how your family and children can grow in their faith as you discover the beautiful links that God reveals throughout Scripture about the history of His people and His Son Jesus, our Messiah. This is my friend, Karol Joseph, who I have known for decades, which is weird to say.
Yes.
Hi, Karol.
Hi, Rachel.
Thank you so much for being here. I am very excited because we're doing this new little series on the podcast of hearing testimonies of how Jesus has changed the lives of particularly Jewish people. And so I am very excited to hear your story because even though we have known each other for a very long time, I don't know that I know your actual literal come to Jesus moment. So I'm excited to hear your story. Before we dive into all of that, will you just give us like a little bit of your background, where you live, what you do for a living?
So I'm speaking to you from sunny southern Florida, where I've lived since, well, I bought a place here in 2016, but I went back and forth to New York for a few years. So I've been full-time in Florida. Thank you, God, since right before COVID.
Oh,
and I
wow.
got to,
Right. Okay, good.
Instead of going through COVID in the middle of New York City, I got to spend COVID here in Florida. And as often happens, you say, God, why? I love New York. I don't want to leave New York. And then when COVID hit, I went, oh.
I see what you were doing.
You were trying to bless me without my even knowing it and keep me safe.
Yes, absolutely.
So I've been in Florida for the past several years, but I've worked with Jews for Jesus since 1990.
So, since 1990. Okay.
Yes.
So you and I met probably, let me think about this, in 1991, I believe, because that's when I went to New York and we did a summer witnessing campaign together.
Exactly.
And you know what I remember, Karol? I know I say this to you all the time, but like when we had to do our like little role playing of like, okay, what if this would happen on the streets when you're witnessing to someone who's Jewish? And I absolutely hated doing those because they felt so fake. I understood the purpose behind it, but it was like, I'm not putting on a show here, people. And every time I would look at you, because I was so nervous, you'd always have your hands like in a praying position and just say, mouth the word pray to me. Pray, Rachel, just pray. You'll be fine.
And you were. And that was probably the best lesson out of that whole exercise, because you're always going to get caught in a situation where you don't have the words, or I was mostly afraid that I would dishonor God because I wouldn't have the right answer. And they'd go, see, it's not true. And my goodness. And so the best lesson is in those moments, just take a breath and ask God for calm and the right words to speak. I can't tell you how many times I've said things and go, wow, that wasn't me.
Where did that come from?
That came directly from the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've had similar experiences, and I'm sure our listeners can tell us stories too. I think you're right that is the best lesson of that whole training. And when I'm in
desperate moments, there are times that I can picture your face and your little prayer hands and your mouthing to me, pray, just pray, Rachel, pray.
I love that. I love
and that that was over 30 years ago.
It was over 30 years ago, believe it or not.
I know.
It's been quite a ride, those 30 years.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So, okay, let me ask you, are you still on staff with Jews for Jesus?
I am, but in 2020, I went down to halftime, and I'm working with Laura Barron and a team of women that are doing outreach to the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, and it has been amazing. Amazing for all the things that I'm learning. I love that I'm in my 70s and still learning.
That's
beautiful. I feel just like I did in 1990 when I came into this ministry and I knew next to nothing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Now I feel like I'm learning hugely about this community.
Okay, so for those listening that don't know what you're talking about, tell us a little bit about that. We will get in. I do want to hear your testimony.
No, I know, but when you just started talking to me about this, I got so excited. Like,
I can see on your face. Yes.
Right. Because, okay, so the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community right now is about 15% of the Jewish community. And most of us that came to faith in the 60s, 70s, and afterwards, we're not from religious backgrounds. We're from culturally Jewish backgrounds. And so we've always been, I'm Jewish, bat mitzvah in a conservative synagogue, raised in a Jewish community in Newton, a very Jewish suburb of Boston.
Oh.
And so I always felt in Jews for Jesus that I was doing same culture ministry. We were Jews going to Jews to share what happened to us and the good news for them. Because I know them. I know their culture. I know what they've grown up with because it's the same as me.
Because you lived it, right?
I lived it. To the ultra-Orthodox, I'm not really even Jewish because to them, it's what you do, not what you believe. And you've believed in Jesus and that puts you outside of the Jewish community. But the reality is that population is growing so fast because they came out of a handful of survivors from the Holocaust. And they've grown into, I think, 300,000 or 500,000 just in New York City.
Is that right?
Yes, because their goal is to, and one rabbi, I remember when he passed away in his obituary said he had 10 children and 90 grandchildren. Each one was named after somebody in the family that they lost in the Holocaust. And their goal was to replace every one of the 6 million. So they all aim to have 10 or more children. I think the average turns into about 8 kids to every family. They live separated from the broader culture. So for the first time in 34 years of ministry, I'm doing cross-cultural ministry. I know nothing about who they are or what their experience is, but I have learned a lot. And one of the things that's happened this year, and I'm just going to plug this because I'm very, very excited about it, is we do a monthly Zoominar. For believers, because this year our goal is to educate, inspire, and mobilize Christians to learn more about who the Haredim are and be prepared, because we totally believe that God is going to pour out His Spirit on the Haredim like He did on the secular Jewish college students of the 1970s.
Yes.
And that we want the body of Messiah to be ready. So I want to tell you about that people can join if they go on Facebook. Go ahead. You want to stop me?
I want to ask you one question to make sure everybody understands Haredim and what that word means.
Okay. So the Haredim is kind of the umbrella term for ultra-Orthodox Jewish people. And within that, just like in the church, there's a charismatic stream, which is called Hasidic, and a non-charismatic stream, which is they call yeshivish, because they're focused on education and learning. And there's a whole vast group in between. The biggest kind of characteristic is that they also are gender segregated.
Yes.
So that women and men from probably the age of 3 or 5 live completely separately from the men. The only men they know are brothers in their families and
I didn't
fathers
realize
and
at such a young age.
because they start school. As soon as they start school,
Separated.
The boys go to boys' schools, the girls to girls' schools.
Oh, okay.
Because they're raised for different things. The males are raised to be scholars, study the Torah and the Talmud. And the women, the girls, are raised to be mothers and homemakers and to keep a Jewish home. So they're on very different tracks. Many of them have arranged marriages. There's, it's just a completely different culture.
It is, yeah. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so tell us about the Zoominar.
So the Zoominars are always on the second Monday of every month from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock Eastern time. But even more importantly, because we have about a year's worth of information, education, we've been teaching these for a while. We started over in January with an introductory Zoominar, and then we're building.
Okay.
And all of them are on our Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
So we started a Facebook group. It's called Haredi Ministry Focus.
Okay. I was just going to ask you what it was called so people can go find it. Spell Haredi.
Haredi. Wait a minute. Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing.
No, that's fine. I asked you a trick question.
No. It's all very good and humbling. Haredi.
Okay.
Haredi Ministry Focus on Facebook. They'll ask you 3 questions.
Yeah, like before you join the group.
Who told you about that? If you say Carol, they won't know Rachel, or I'd say just say Rachel.
Yeah, but no, say Carol so they can get
Joseph, in. And where you go to church, and then there are some rules. Because this is really for Christians, and we don't want people who would want to use the material to harm us or ultra-Orthodox Jews. And then we'll go ahead and admit you, and you can watch the old videos. You'll get notifications of the upcoming Zoominars. That was so amazing to share right at the get-go.
Oh, good. Well, that's awesome. I think it's amazing. Yeah, I think it's amazing what you're doing. And it's well needed because it's such a niche community. And I'm guessing there are not many Christians that are reaching this group of people.
Not yet. But they are projected to be 25% of the Jewish community by 2040. And in Israel, it might be even 40%. So they're growing when the other branches are not.
Interesting.
And we need to understand who they are.
Yes, absolutely.
Because most Christians think, the only difference is that they don't have the New Testament. They just study the Old Testament. But the reality is they study more the rabbinic texts.
And I like that you said that it's a completely different culture, because I can think like, I'm going to Brazil. It's a totally different culture. But this is right here in the United States, and it's a totally different culture.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm really glad you and Laura are doing that.
And a larger group of people from a variety of ministries. It's been amazing. It's a real collaborative effort.
Oh, I see. Great.
That makes it even more unique.
Even better. Yeah. Because you can have a further reach to train
all
people.
The skills. And we're always looking for people, volunteers to help Haredi people that are in need. Everything. Yeah. Anyway, I know. I'm going to tell you my story soon.
I know. It's great. I love it. Right before we started, I said, it's just like we're sitting at the table having a cup of coffee.
Yes.
It's all good. Okay. So this is what I do want to really hear is how you came to Jesus. You already mentioned that you were bat mitzvah, and so you were raised in a conservative Jewish home. So how in the world did Jesus find you?
Well, believe it or not, it started at Brandeis University, which is, if you don't know, it's a pretty Jewish college.
Yeah.
Outside of Boston and Waltham. And I was working on a PhD in healthcare policy in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Really? Okay.
Yes. And one of my classmates, his name was Chris, was a born-again Christian. I'd never met I'd never met anybody that said they were born again. I had never heard the gospel. I had always grown up loving God, but always feeling that I didn't measure up, that no matter what I could do, I would never be worthy of his love, or certainly not heaven.
Really?
And I was the only one in my family that really was that way. Like most of my family enjoyed being Jewish, but I was the one that was they would call me the religious one. I wanted to do more. I thought that if I could just get my mother to light the candles, or if we would just keep kosher or Shabbat, then we would make God happy. And I tried very, very, very hard.
Yeah,
but
you're trying to earn his love.
Earn it. And I was plagued by fears before Jesus. I came to Jesus, I was 36 years old. So I have a very clear BC and AD for me.
Yes. Very clear distinction of
there it was.
Change.
And the me before was anxious for everything. And, I grew up during the Cold War. I waited for the end of the world. I waited for the nuclear attack from Russia. The first kind of world event I knew about was the Bay of Pigs.
Oh, really?
And so Russia was right there, at the border of Cuba, ready to bomb us. And I waited for that. And so I was always
in fear.
I lived in fear and anxiety, not knowing what would happen. But I always thought after God. And when I met Chris, I was at Brandeis, and we were both in the same PhD program. And, when you get to the end of your coursework, you take comprehensive exams.
Right.
And I was concerned that I wasn't going to pass my comprehensive exams in economics.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody told me there was a student that tutored people, and I hired him to tutor me in economics. And we became very, very good friends. And so when we created a study group to study for the comps in general, we were the two people that started it, and we invited two more to complete it. We passed our comprehensive. But he is, to this day, the smartest person I've ever known. I've never known anybody smarter.
Excuse me, what?
Yeah, excuse me.
I'm sorry. Should I be offended? No,
no, not at all.
Okay, so this guy, Chris, was a Christian. You're in school together in this study group. You're very anxious.
Here's what happened. His wife had their third child, and he was born with very severe birth defects.
Oh.
And I looked at him, and I thought, I would never be able to cope with that. It would just be beyond what and he had this peace that transcended all understanding. He named him Matthew. He told me that meant gift of God. He looked at me kind of, what do you mean? When I said, how can you handle this? What do you mean? He's my gift from God. And I said, whatever that is, that's what I'm looking for. I didn't come to faith right away, and Chris wasn't the one that led me to faith, but I also struggled with an eating disorder.
Oh, yes.
And I
did
was
know that.
I went in desperation, went to a 12-step program for compulsive eating.
Okay.
And there I learned how to be a Christian. Because, the first three steps, listen to the steps. I admitted I was powerless and my life had become unmanageable. Right. I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him.
Wow.
Step 11, praying only for knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out.
Step 11, say it again. I want to take that in.
Step 11 is the one that led me to Christ.
Okay.
Because, step 1, 2, and 3 are steps of conversion. I can't, God.
Right.
Step 2, I confess that I'm a sinner and I can't fix this.
Yes.
But you can. And then step 3 is I will turn my will and my life over to your care.
And tell me again what step 11
now 11
was.
is.
Yeah. Okay. So you went through all, that takes a long time.
I went through the 10, 4 through 10 is like cleaning up the wreckage of your past, making amends to people.
Right. Yes.
Dealing with all the kick. Then 11 says, sought to connect through prayer and meditation, seek a conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out.
Knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that.
I knew in step 1, I am powerless.
Right.
And in a real way, not in a way that people go, oh, of course I am. But in a real way of, like this is...
Yeah, you really understood it deep in your soul.
It like an alcoholic understands it. You can't just stop. You can't just do this. And that was my morning devotions every day. The first 3 steps, the prayer, that I would walk, that I could have conscious contact with God, praying for knowledge of his will and power to carry it out. And that coupled with Chris.
Okay.
Because I forget, I can't believe I even forget this. I think Chris must have shared the gospel with me at that point.
Okay.
And I went home and made a decision that for 21 days I was going to pray and ask God, if Jesus really is who Chris says he is, show me. If you show me that it's true, I'm in. But if it's not true, please don't let me follow a false God.
Wow.
Please
that was your prayer.
Please protect me from following an idol. That was my prayer.
Is your family racing from one activity to the next activity? Are you stressed out because your to-do list never feels completed? Maybe you just need to rest. Shabbat is the Hebrew word for rest or Sabbath. We are commanded to keep the Sabbath holy. But what does that look like? We've created a fun-filled activity box to help you do just that. Besides having games, activities, stickers, and an awesome playlist of music, the Shabbat box will help your family come together to create lifelong memories. The goal of the Shabbat box is to come alongside of your family and generate some exciting and meaningful habits around rest. Curious to know more? Check it out at linkstoMessiah.com or click the link in the show notes.
What happened in those 21 days?
I prayed it every day. I didn't even know that it happened, but it's somewhere around day 20-ish. I'm talking, Chris and I were having lunch, and he just looked at me and he went, I think you've come to know Jesus as your Messiah. Or he said, I think you're ready to accept Jesus as your Messiah. And literally, you know, when Mary goes to Elizabeth and John in Elizabeth's womb spirit.
Yes.
That's what happened to me. He said to me, I think you're ready to accept Jesus as your Messiah. And I went, whoa, I think I already have.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I think you have to. And we prayed.
Oh.
And then I thought that was the end. I'm serious. I went, I have now arrived. I've arrived. Because I had a great job and a beautiful condo and a little red sports car, and I'm getting my PhD at Brandeis. And what else do you need? You got Jesus too. This is it. Because in the process of OA, Overeaters Anonymous, I really had come to a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
So the only thing left was, what was I being awakened to? And I find that to be true in a lot of Jewish people. They have an awakening. You don't have to be a believer in Jesus to have a spiritual awakening.
Oh, yeah. Right. Absolutely.
But what you need Jesus for is salvation.
Yes.
So
what would you say, like, when you realized about that word awakening and what that means in your life? What did that look like?
It meant that I was not alone, that God was in me, not in the Christian way of the Spirit indwelling, but in the sense that I was no longer talking to myself. I was having a running conversation with God and was experiencing responses to that.
So I'm guessing that the new part was, it's about a relationship with him.
The relationship, yes. Because the transformation began. I had to go through and make a list of the people that I'd harmed, and I had to go and ask them forgiveness and make amends to them.
Yes.
And I had to make a list of my character defects and ask God to change me. And he was.
Right. He was changing. You were being transformed through the whole process. Yeah.
Exactly. But you come to a point in that process where for many people, they don't, sadly. They are satisfied with that and it stops. But if we're continuing to seek God to show me your will, it was the show me your will that caused me to say, oh, is Jesus your will, or is that like just the Christian's will?
Wow.
To win me to their religion.
I'm quiet because I'm just processing what you're saying. Because
I'm processing it too. Every time I share my story, it comes out different. It's different.
Yes, right. It's
and
so
I see different
beautiful.
pieces of it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm very curious what your family thought when you came to them and told them, well, guess what? I believe Jesus is the Messiah now.
Oh, no, it was even worse. It was worse, Rachel. It was worse than just telling them that I believed in Jesus because I didn't tell them.
Oh, okay.
I knew that they were going to think it was a phase.
Okay, so you were scared to tell them.
I wanted to show them. I wanted them to see me differently.
Different.
Because I was different.
Yes.
I was different. So it was like 9 months later. But what had happened was that I say this piece of my story all the time because it was so true. I feel like God said, it's taken you long enough to get here. Let's go. Because I feel like I put my hand around a rocket ship and we just took off.
Good description.
I had never read the Bible all the way through before. Most Jewish people don't read the Bible all the way through. Even if we want to, we get through Genesis and Exodus, and then they hit Leviticus, and it's kind of over.
Leviticus, woo! Yeah.
Yeah. And so I read through the Bible in like the first 3 months. I didn't know what I was reading. I just read through the whole thing, and I read it through again. And then I met Jews for Jesus.
Okay.
And I started
I wanted to get that because I was like, okay, how did we go from I'm getting my PhD to now I'm with Jews for Jesus?
Well, so a week after I became a believer, I got a phone call from Steve Cohen, who was the missionary in Boston at the time.
You did?
And I said, I cannot believe. Well, first of all, several months earlier, I had sent away for a Yeshua book that was advertised, full page ad in the Boston Globe at Christmas.
Okay, yes.
And I sent away. And the only reason I sent away for it was at the bottom, it had a box that said, don't call me. Like I didn't want to.
You would have the option to say, just send me the book and leave me alone.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And so I did. I got the book and they left me alone. But 6 months later, they
didn't leave you alone.
Well,
no,
they did. Kidding. No, they did in that way.
Teasing.
They sent me a letter saying, would you like more books? Kind of, do you want more books? We have questions and answers book, which is still my favorite Jews for Jesus publication. Then they said, would you like to be contacted? And that time they said yes.
Okay. That's a really cool approach. I love that it was honored that they would not call you.
Right.
But yet they wanted to give you more books.
Just a second opportunity to continue to read and understand. And maybe now you'd want to. And I said yes. And a week later, Steve Cohen called me. And it was right after I'd come to faith.
Wow.
And so I went, I can't believe you're calling me. I just came to believe in Jesus like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I forget.
Oh, I see. I gotcha.
And I began to volunteer with the local branch in Boston. And I went to Friday night services. And I also went to an amazing church in Massachusetts that I was baptized in 1989. But before I knew it, Steve was asking me whether I wanted to be a missionary. I wasn't a believer a year yet, or maybe just a year, I forget. But it was very fast.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I don't want to be a missionary.
You're like, are you crazy?
Your life is insane. I don't want to do that. And I really have a privileged life here. And I'm in the middle of all these things. But I knew not to say no so fast. And I began to pray because I became convicted that since I was now a believer in Jesus, I had to move to Israel.
Oh, really?
And I asked people in my church, there's wisdom. I had such wise people in my life because I said, I think I'm being called to Israel. I'm a Jewish believer. Where else am I supposed to go? I have to sell everything and move. Quit my job, sell everything and go. But I probably learned this in 12 steps. Ask 3 trusted, wise people their advice. And I did. And they all gave me the exact same advice. They said, you're a new believer and it's very difficult in Israel. But here's what you should do. Wait 6 months before you do anything and prepare to go to Israel. Start learning Hebrew.
Wow.
Research on what it's like to live there and where you would go and, who you're going to connect with and all of that. We didn't have a branch there yet. We'd never work in Israel.
Okay.
And during that time, God closed the door. Because it was during that time that this couple from South Africa had tried to make Aliyah to immigrate to Israel as Jews. And they found out they were believers in Jesus. And the Supreme Court there made the ruling that if you were a believer in Jesus, you could not make Aliyah as a Jew because you had abandoned this community.
Right.
And so I said, wow, I'm not willing to go to Israel and lie about believing in Jesus.
Yeah.
So God, you must be closing the door. So he was closing that door, but opening the door to Jews for Jesus. And that's when I had to tell my family.
Because you were making a job change, basically.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So I didn't just tell them that I was believing in Jesus. It was, I'm believing in Jesus. I'm quitting the PhD program. I'm selling my house and I'm going to work full time with Jews for Jesus. Take that as a parent.
Whoa. I'm sure they were thrilled and sent you congratulations cards. No, did they think you had just utterly lost your mind?
Totally lost my mind. In fact, I learned many years later that they actually were having a conversation about having me kidnapped and deprogrammed. But I was 36 years old. I wasn't 18.
Yeah, right. You're not like a little
And so
kid,
they didn't, but I didn't know that until many, many, many years later.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. So we were...
Well, that tells us how they took the news. That tells us everything we need to know.
It wasn't good. But, I'm very grateful to God because while it took a long time, all the relationships in my family were restored.
That was my next question. Yeah. How did that turn out in the relationships? Because that's a really tough pill for a lot of families to swallow.
Oh, yeah. That was really hard. That was very, very hard. In the end, we got through it. And I did too. So I realized that part of it was me separating from them and not just me wanting the relationship and them rejecting me, which is what most believers assume. I was persecuted and rejected, but I had chosen to leave them to follow Jesus. And and God was gracious to me because it was easier than trying to manage some of those relationships while walking the path that I walked. And the timing is always his. So they were resolved in the proper time. And now, in the proper time. So I don't have any regrets.
It's really, really amazing how the ways that God reaches us, like your friend in your program who had this child, and how just your relationship with him, it was life altering. And I think that's a good message for us as believers that people are watching how we live.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes it's very hard to be the example, if you're struggling. But sometimes I think the beauty is share your struggle.
Oh, yeah.
We are.
Yes, because
we're all broken people.
Yeah, it makes us human.
Yeah.
We never want to hide that.
So then you started going, we do not want to hide that.
We do not want to hide that.
So then you became a missionary with Jews for Jesus. Did you go to New York?
I did. I went to New York for a year of training. All of our missionary training was in New York.
Okay.
And at the end of the year, they sent me to Boston, but then back to Boston. But less than a year later, they needed somebody to go to Canada and take over the work there because the leader had left unexpectedly.
Okay. And that was Toronto, right?
Toronto. So I spent 4.5 years in Toronto.
Okay.
And when David Brickner became the executive director in 1996, he visited Toronto and he was talking to me and he said, well, what would you want to do if you had any? I said, I would like to learn how to be. I've never really been a missionary because he wanted me to be the missionary trainer. And I said, I can't train missionaries. I don't feel like I
want to do the work.
I need to do the work before I can train others to do the work. And he said, oh, that makes sense. And he sent me to LA for 2 years. And I went to Fuller during that time, got my master's with a specialization in Jewish evangelism. And then I went back to New York where I spent about 20 years.
Okay. Oh, and you were there 20 years.
I was there 20 years.
Wow, Karol. Amazing. Yeah. And then moved to Florida just in time for COVID.
Just in time.
Wow.
Just before
amazing.
COVID.
Wow. It is so beautiful. I love to hear anybody's story of your life was completely 100, totally transformed and changed. It changed the entire trajectory of your life. You were in this PhD program, pursuing all this and then
Exactly.
I love it. It's so beautiful. God's so good how he just comes and meets us right where we are. Right where we are. Beautiful. Well, I'm grateful for you sharing your story with us. I think a lot of people will be blessed by hearing that and hopefully encouraged to be bold. Share Jesus with your Jewish friends and neighbors. Yeah. It can
and
be
learn.
life-changing and learn.
Yes, and come on our Facebook page and learn more about the Haredi.
Yes. Okay. I will put that in our show notes, and that way people can just click on it and go right there. So that'll be nice.
Great. Haredi Ministry Focus.
Yeah. Thank you, Karol.
You're welcome,
Appreciate
Rachel.
your time.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for being a part of the Links to Messiah podcast family. Your support means the world to us, and your feedback and engagement keep us going strong. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's continue growing this incredible community together. Until next week, keep reading the Bible to your children, keep their curiosity burning, and keep coming back for more tips to anchor your child's faith to Jesus, our Messiah. This is your host, Rachel Links Kushner, signing off with a big smile and a heart full of gratitude.